I want to say, stop that mentality. You deserve better.
Yeah.
You deserve to know the full picture. And there's a lot of companies that don't want you to know that. I get it. It's their business. It's fine with them. But if you could, wouldn't that give you the ability to make a better decision on what agency you chose?
I love it. I love that. Not only do I love that we're advocating for travel nurses, but it's just the right thing to do. What's up, folks? My name is Andrew Craig, and today I'm here with Mark Holloway. He is the CEO of Meridian Medical Staffing out of Littleton, Colorado. If you didn't know, Mark and I have been doing some talks on YouTube about travel nursing topics. As you know, I'm big on transparency, on ethical practice in the industry, and Mark has decided to take some time out of his day to really take me behind the scenes as a travel nurse, because oftentimes travel nurses have no idea what agencies do in the background scenes. So this is very, very exciting for me. And so today we're going to be talking about bill rates. And we did a video a couple weeks back about bill rates, but today we're going to dive in a little deeper. Mark is really going to open up the curtains essentially for us and just showing the background processes to what agencies are up to. And so we can learn more about bill rates and the breakdown. And so I'm super excited to share that with you right now. Mark, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you, Andrew?
Oh man, I am so excited. I was just curious. We did an interview a couple weeks back about bill rates, and how did that go over on your end? Have you seen anything online or on social media about that?
Yeah, it was. I think it went over pretty well. It was well received. I think it opened up some conversation, which I think is what you were really wanting to accomplish, and really to get a travel nurse for he or she to really start to question some things and really start to ask some important questions. I think everything we saw was positive. I didn't really see anything, negative at all. I thought it was overall a good interview. I enjoyed it. It was fun to talk to you as always, and for me, it was a good experience.
It's been pretty amazing, actually. This interview kind of opened up the gateway of conversation. People from all facets of the industry have messaged me on LinkedIn, other CEOs. It's like people wanted to talk about this, but they just haven't yet. And I don't know why that is, but it's exciting to be involved into something that really hasn't been done before.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of fun to see the evolution, if you will, of just even if it's a little bit of that travel nurse community start to say, hey, hang on a second, this guy's got some good stuff to talk about. I'm talking about you, obviously, not. And I think it's important because the topics, you're the traveler, and if there's something that you feel is a topic that a nurse, he or she needs to know about, they're starting to tune in, and I think it's pretty exciting for you that you're getting that audience. Awesome. So before we got into it, I pretty much scour social media. I'm on all the Facebook groups. One of the things that I've noticed right now is there's a lot of talk about pay packages not being up to par lately. And I don't really have a good answer. And I know we talked about this previously. Any ideas what might be going on right now? I think anybody's guess is as good as ours. I truly believe it has a lot to do with a lot of things happening at the same time. And the first and foremost is there's some seasonality to it. We do see a downturn in needs, right when summer's all over, and it picks back up when kids start going to school. People get sick. I've got 2 children. It's like a petri dish. If the weather changes, which it hasn't yet, we're in beautiful Colorado, and it's 80 degrees outside today, just gorgeous. So, that's not helping the seasonality of the communities that are retired that tend to head further south for the winter time. And it's just, I think it has to do with a lot of things. I saw a couple of comments about, the health care bill that Congress and Senate is trying to pass. That does leave some uncertainty for hospital administrators. So they are becoming very creative, I think, in their way of staffing. At the end of the day, there's still a nursing shortage. Sometimes in our world, it just cycles. It cycles up and cycles down. We're having one heck of a couple of weeks. But I will tell you, our recruiters have submitted more nurses in the last 2 weeks than they have, any given 2-week period in the summertime, because there's been more jobs available. But that means we're not the only company doing that. So I guarantee, I've told them, lower your expectations. Tell those nurses to get in front of multiple places, because they can't put their eggs in one basket. And, right now we're hearing a lot of discussions that veteran travelers, the real nurses that we look for, they're taking the first thing that comes to them because they don't want to be unemployed. So it's not about chasing dollars currently as much as it has been. It's about staying gainfully employed, and those dollars will come back again. For those that want to, that's their mode. There are nurses that it's not always about money, but the ones that are looking for those high paying and then that are maybe complaining that the jobs are a little low, they're going to have to kind of work through it. Maybe take one assignment. I would imagine by the time we get into the dead of winter, they'll be right back up again.
I gotcha. So flexibility is really key during these times right now. It's not always about the really awesome locations as it is just, like you say, staying employed. Yeah,
and again, one of the topics we'll talk about down the road, I think, is going to be is a travel nurse's marketability, which has a lot to do with not only licenses and their specialty, but their willingness to go to those places. It's amazing how many times right now we're getting a nurse that I want, this city or 3 hours away. Well, you're not really a traveler, and we're going to have a hard time finding a job, whereas the next phone call is somebody that's worked with us before that wants to go, in any of a multitude of locations, and we can give them a plan A, B, and C. So flexibility, Andrew, you're right, is humongous right now.
I gotcha. So I think it's really time. I am so excited about this, Mark. I know I can see you. You're excited too. I think we should get right into it.
Sure.
We're here to learn about the bill rate and really the breakdown of that process. And so you're going to take me on essentially a training that you provide for your staff?
Correct.
Awesome. So I'm going to give you the mic and you're going to just drop some knowledge on us.
All right. Well, 36,000 foot view. And again, this is just how our company does it. So this is why if you call our company and you want to find out about bill rate, you can ask any recruiter, and they should be able to walk you through. So if they don't, you need to call me. So let's go back and use the example we used a few weeks ago of that $70 bill rate. I think I grabbed a state, and I think I used New Hampshire just because it worked out really well. So let's talk about that $70 bill rate, and let's put that up. And I feel like I'm teaching class here, Professor Mark, but let's do this, and let me know if you can't see that or if my handwriting is really bad.
That looks good. That looks perfect.
So we've got a bill rate, right? And this is, again, like we talked about 3 weeks ago, this is 99% of the time is dictated to us agencies. They throw an offer out and they say, we're looking for a telemetry nurse for 12-hour nights at this hospital. Here is our proposed rate. And so we all scramble and talk to the nurses that we know that have that specialty, that are willing to go to the location, have that license, have that experience that they're talking about. And we move into starting to recruit for those people, presenting opportunities. Hopefully they call you and make sure that you're going in front of that job before they blindly submit you. Another topic of discussion. The first thing that I want to point out is that very commonly, as we talked about, there are oftentimes a vendor fee. A vendor is a middleman. Oftentimes they're a liaison between the hospital and us agencies, and whether hospitals know this or not, they may say they're a free service. They are to the hospital, but there is a percentage that they take off right off the top. And maybe to answer your question earlier, this could be an area that we're seeing a slight decrease in pay, because I'm noticing that vendors are starting to increase their percentage. I hope they don't increase it too much, or they'll start being out of, hospitals start going around them. Like we've noticed in the last 2 or 3 weeks, we've gotten a whole bunch of contracts that are directly to a hospital. Maybe it's to cut off this fee. But let's talk about a vendor fee. And again, the typical vendor fee we're seeing now is about 6%. So it's pretty easy to look at a $70 bill rate and come up with whatever 6% is. In our example, this is $4.20. This goes directly to the vendor. We don't see this. We actually see a $65.80 bill rate. So I'm just going to kind of draw a line to that and put, can you see that? Is that too high?
Are you able to? Oh, that's good. That works. Yep, I can see it.
So in reality, of that $70, this is one of the first things that a travel nurse should know. If she hears or he hears my manager said we've got a $70 bill rate. The chances are really high that it's not the same rate we're seeing, because there's going to be a $4.20 per hour basis that's going to go right to that vendor. The way it works is that the timesheets all go through that vendor. We either give them to them or they provide them to us once they see them. They bill the hospital. When they pay us, they pull that $4.20 out. So we're being paid on $65.80, not $70. The other problem is that it oftentimes delays payment. I've got one vendor that's notoriously horrible for paying us after 90 days, which means the travel nurse is done with his or her assignment before we're actually getting our first dollar back from that first week's of invoice. So we track that, and those vendors that do that, we try to use less because money's expensive. And you multiply that by 100 nurses, you can't have, $2.5 million sitting out there and then having to, get paid on it 90 days later. But let's just make sure that people understand this is very rarely the figure that we see as an agency. If we have a direct bill with a facility, then it would be. But typically, the nice part is when we have a direct fee with an agency, that's usually less than 70 because the hospital's going to save some money. We're going to be able to offer a little bit more to the nurse. It all works out well. But there are some vendors that do a very good job at providing this service. It's an ease of communication, as we mentioned last time. It's a website.
Yep.
Their jobs, we can see them. All companies can see them. It's a little pricey, in my opinion, but that's just my opinion.
So, Mark, quick question. I don't know if you're going to show at the end, but what does $4.20 amount to in a standard 13-week contract?
Well, I can do that. I can do that math, pretty simply. I'll put it this way. It's around $2,000, just slightly under $2,000. Now, again, in all fairness to the vendors, we'd still be splitting that 80-20 with the nurse. And obviously, of that 80, he or she would have some payroll taxes. So we're probably talking about a $3 an hour difference in pay rate, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So in our example, I'm already going to kind of cut to the chase. We're going to use a $34 pay rate. That would be $37, which is $1,400 more over a 13-week assignment in nurse's pocket.
So to clarify, without a vendor in an exclusive contract with an agency to a hospital, you could potentially bring home, let's say, $1,000 to $2,000 more dollars over a contract with having exclusivity. Is that about right? I
would say that's the case. The problem is there's not very many hospitals that do that. So the reality is, as much as great as that sounds for your viewers out there, it's not. It doesn't exist that much. However, we're starting to see a little bit more of that. Back in the old days, where a hospital is saying, "I just want to work directly with a handful of agencies." I want to cut that out. But model really isn't. The model is this, where there is a vendor fee that comes right out. The problem has been, I've watched this go over the last 2 years from 4 to 5 to now 6%. And it doesn't seem like a lot, but it's becoming where if we're making 20%, like you and I talked about, if there's 6% taken off the top of that, that eats in. That eats into the money that's available for us to pay a nurse, bottom line.
Makes perfect sense.
Okay. So let's kind of continue. So when we're figuring out a pay rate, we know that we're really working off a $65.80 margin now. So let's talk about the things that we do know. What are the things that we get that we give to a nurse? There's, in our company, and I'm not saying all companies, but there's a housing either stipend, or like our company, we either provide furnished, private housing for the nurse, and we'll pay for that for him or her, or we'll give them that tax-free housing stipend. Some companies don't do this at all, and you should know that. I know that you work for a company. I'm not sure if they do that, but there are a number of companies now where they just lump it all into an hourly rate. This is, again, different people's packages. Some companies, I don't know if they just don't want to deal with housing. It's the biggest liability that we have in our industry, so I can understand that mentality. But that's a benefit we want to talk about. So in this example, I want to use a nice figure of $1,900 a month. Obviously, we'll talk about maybe in the fall in New Hampshire, it could be pretty expensive. We want to make sure that we have plenty of money. If we quote a rate and we find out that the housing is less or more, we don't have to go back to the nurse and double change it. So 11 years experience, we have a pretty good idea of what this means. Now, I'm going to back up a little bit. In order for us to be able to calculate this into a hourly rate, we have to look at what it is that we're actually looking at over the course of a 13-week assignment. Simple arithmetic. I'll do it here and I'll erase it. You've got 13 weeks times, in our example, we're going to pretend this is a 12-hour shift nurse, not a 40-hour I'm sorry, not an 8-hour shift nurse. So 13 times 36 is 468 expected hours. So everything that we're going to do is going to be divided by that 468 number of hours to get an actual hourly rate, if that makes sense to you.
Yes.
So I'm going to write that 468 up here because we'll refer to it a few times. Let's take our 1900. In this example, if we want to come up with an hourly rate for what we're offering, we're going to look at 3 months, 13 weeks of paying $1,900 a month. So really this is 1900 times 3 divided by 468 hours. And that happens to be, and I cheated, $12.18 per hour. And you can have your people do the math. If you take 1218 multiplied by 468, you're going to come up with whatever 3 times 1900 is, which I can't do in my head. But it's about 5,700. So I actually can do it in my head. I told you I was kind of a numbers geek.
Yeah.
So this is a benefit that the nurse will receive. This is a cost. It's a cost of goods sold. Right?
Yes.
So a couple other things that most agencies offer. Most agencies offer some form of a travel reimbursement. So I want to use a nice round even figure for travel. Let's just say $500. Obviously, I know agencies have varying degrees. Some of them are really high in their travel, but as we'll talk about, nothing's free.
Right.
Sometimes you're not going that far away, so maybe you're going in the same state or you're going into 1 or 2 states away. But let's use 500 because all we're doing now is taking 500 and dividing it by 468, so it's just a little over $1. It happens to be $1.07 if you do that math. Not a huge benefit, but it is one that's obviously offered. Lastly, we'll talk about an insurance benefit. Most companies, even though the nurse pays, his or her portion of their insurance, most, decent-sized companies will offer an insurance benefit that the company provides X amount of dollars for that employee's insurance weekly. In our case, it's $2.17 per hour. So that's our benefit that we are going to be contributing. The nurse doesn't see that, but it certainly is a cost of goods sold. We wouldn't have that if it wasn't for the nurse. So they may not see this because they're thinking, wow, I see this, this pre-tax deduction from my check, but there is a portion that most companies will be paying on their own. This is going to vary pretty heavily, I think, from company to company, depending upon how strong or how catastrophic their insurance plans. They may have multiple. There's all kinds of, insurance is like cigars and wine. You get what you pay for. So in our case, this is the average of what we're contributing for an employee. So what does that leave left? It really leaves your hourly rate, right? And it leaves the tax burden that is based upon that hourly rate. What does that mean? For every dollar that a company pays you through payroll, it's not just free, Andrew, here's your $34 and we get, $34. There's a percentage that we pay to that state in which you are currently working. You're from Iowa, I believe, the great state of Iowa, but if you're in Minnesota, you're going to pay Minnesota taxes. Again, totally different topic for our conversation. You'll get those back because they'll take those and apply those to your home Iowa taxes, but we have to pay payroll taxes for every hour and every dollar that we pay you hourly. So this is the thing that we don't know. I've already shared with you, the last thing is the company profit, right? Or the margin that we like to call it. We already know ours. Like I say, I cheated and told you ours was 20%. We'll prove it to you on a daily basis, but other companies have margins that are similar. Some are higher, some are lower. We'll talk about, there's really no right or wrong with that. So we already know that. So I can already write that figure in. And by the way, this is based upon the 6580. So we're not taking 20% of 70. We're taking 20% of what is left. In this case, again, you can do the math in this. It's $12.02. For today, and I don't want to confuse anybody out there, but I'm going to actually tell you that of the $70, it's 17.17%. This is 17.17% of 70, which is really 20% of the 6580. In the discussion, I'm going to do a pie chart to show you where all this 70 goes. It wouldn't be fair of me to take 20% because we're not taking 20%. We're actually taking 17.17 of this figure, but we're, make no mistake, we're taking 20% of the 6580, and we don't make too many bones about that. So what's left? The hourly rate and the tax burden. So I already mentioned, we're talking about, wrong color, we're already talking about $34 an hour. And again, I cheated, did the math on this one before. The tax burden on that is $4.36. And I just, like I said, I can't remember which state I used, but I believe it was one of the New England states. This is the entire full amount of that $70. It's all gone. The nice part, which I think, again, this is, I can't speak for other companies, but for our company's model, this, I don't know if you can see colors very well on the screen, but this blue section here, this is 70.6% of that $70. Unfortunately for a nurse, yeah, we're making our 17% of that 70, or our 20% margin of what we're actually being able to bill. The government, I'll do the math for you, they're making 6.23 in this example percent. The vendor's making 6%, but the nurse is making 70.6. So it feels like, gosh, Mark, there's a $70 bill rate. How come I'm only making $34 an hour? Most travel nurses can see this housing pretty clearly because most recruiters have the ability to be able to walk them through that. They oftentimes don't think about travel. They oftentimes don't think about insurance. They very rarely realize that there's a burden on their payroll that a company has to pay. And it's not a huge amount, but it's a payroll tax. I pay it for our internal employees here. This figure is oftentimes unknown to them. They don't know that there's a benefit. But I think I sent you a pie chart. At the end of the day, it's pretty good with regard to how much the nurse, the benefits to that traveler go to him or her on an assignment.
First thing is first, holy crap. The online forums and groups make it seem like we're getting the shaft essentially as travelers. Now, granted, we're getting 70%. I mean, that's a whole lot more than what I envisioned. Even when you sent me this breakdown and ahead of time, I'm thinking, wow, but 71 basically percent, that's a fair amount. But this is on the 20% margin, that's the thing.
Exactly.
What would the percentage, the percentage would be look like? We'll probably be like in the 50 to 60% on a higher margin.
Yeah, you could do the math pretty easily. If you increase this, and let's just assume that these companies are doing it the same way we're, and Andrew, I have no idea if they are, but if they're doing it off of this margin like I would expect they are, you're talking about 23% here. For a company that's working on 25% margin, they're really seeing 23%. But that is going to drop this down to 66% or 65.6%.
Yep.
So for every 5%, do the math. If you're talking about, I could do it real quick. 70. Let's just do. Yeah, you're talking about $3.50 for every 5%. That's significant. And you saw some companies that it sounded like they were really had some high margins. And again, I'm not here to judge those companies. I believe that every company has a great business plan. I would imagine they've really thought about this extensively. There's got to be some benefit that I'm sure they would be able to rattle off very easily for having a company that has a 28 or 30% margin. Maybe they have an assignment that's in a very specific town. There are some very big companies that currently right now are doing complete fulfillment and have exclusivity in some of the greatest areas in the country. And I'll use Southern California as an example. There's very few companies that have a couple of main systems in San Diego. So if you have to be there or truly want to be there, there's nothing wrong with going to work for one of those companies. Just understand that they're going to have a little bit bigger profit margin, but you got to be where you want to be.
Yeah.
You're not going to get there with an itty bitty company that's just starting out. Certainly not. You may be able to get close with a medium to larger company like ours, where you're maybe in La Jolla or someplace like that, or Huntington Beach further north. But these are the decisions that travelers have to make, and unfortunately, they can't always make them because they can't see these figures. There's 4 pieces to this pie, and one of them, which is the vendor fee, is obsolete. So really, if you know one equation, it's hard to find the other 2 portions of that equation. But if you know this bill rate, you're going to know what a company makes. If you know their margin, you got to be able to guess the bill rate, and that's why I believe that the bill rate should be relatively transparent.
Oh, agreed. I completely agree. And this is so enlightening. So let's see here. I had a few questions. So what happens when you take away the vendor fee with this setup here?
Well, again, you're talking about a 6% margin. I will tell you that this comes to, if we didn't, in this example, if we didn't have it, and let's just say that we still billed a hospital $70. For our company, 84 cents of that would go to us, and $3.36 would be able to go through the rest of these things, which would include taxes. So nurse wouldn't see $3, probably a high, 2 and change, $2.75 more an hour, because the government's going to take their portion of that $3.36. It wouldn't just be free. But it's significant, but I just don't see that changing. Right now, this is the model. Most hospitals really like going through vendors. Again, I think that if vendors keep increasing their fees, they're going to start seeing hospitals moving away from them. But that's just me, and I'm going to get a lot of slack from that. But I believe it's true. I'm already starting to see that. There are some hospitals that we're currently working with that did work with a vendor in 2016 that are saying they've gotten rid of those. And I don't know, you have to talk to them. Maybe they're seeing higher fulfillment. Maybe they're saving some money. Maybe they're splitting the difference between 65, 80, and 70. I don't know. But the trend, I've been in this business, for 19 years. It trended toward vendors. It may trend away. I don't have an answer to that. But this is here, and I would tell your viewers, this is really here to stay. What I would have them focus more on is this figure. There's different business models. And by the way, just because we're making 20% doesn't mean we're the greatest company on the planet. It happens to be our business model. If a company's got a low margin, find out more about them. Are they horrible at paying? Do they have, relationship issues? Do they have 5 hospitals in the country and they're all really difficult hospitals to staff for? There's a big picture to it. But clearly what I would like to see nurses is just stop settling. Stop calling our company, and I can only use this as an example, and saying, hey, Connor or Lucas or Ann, I just want to know what my net take home is every week. I want to say, stop that mentality. You deserve better. You deserve to know the full picture. And there's a lot of companies that don't want you to know that. I get it. It's their business. It's fine with them. But if you could, wouldn't that give you the ability to make a better decision on what agency you chose?
It's interesting you say that, because if you look online, all the advertisements are in the weekly take home.
Yeah.
What's the weekly take home? And when I first started travel nursing, that's the questions that I asked, because that's the only thing that I was taught through social media. It's almost like it's intentionally that way to take you away from knowing about this information and focusing on the net take home.
Well, I think for some nurses, it's an okay answer. It's an okay question to ask. There's nothing wrong with wanting to know that answer. And if that's all you're interested in is how much I'm taking home, then I think that's a fine. Again, I'm not here to tell every company they need to be transparent. It happens to be our model. I think there's a lot of companies that would disagree with it. There's a lot of overwhelming majority of travel nurses, and it was just like you were when you first started out. This sounds great. I'm making $1,500 bucks. That sounds great. What I don't want is to have one of my nurses working next to you and having you make more money than him or her. That would be completely awful for me, because we've gone for 10 years that said you're never going to make less, all things being equal to everybody else. And that's how we're building our company so fast. It's not the right solution for a lot of other companies, but start asking the question. I just think nurses should start to question an offer. Does this make sense? How many times have they gone to assignment and they find out that there's another nurse making a lot more money? Now, the most important thing is you got to compare apples to apples. The first thing I hear is, this nurse is making crazy money, and then they find out that they're not providing any housing. There's like a $10 difference. I'm like, well, with our company, you're actually making $12.18 more cents. So you're actually making more. Oh, gosh, you're right, Mark. So, there's a lot of, this is why our recruiters have to understand this, so they can decipher and to be able to differentiate between someone's plan, because we'll get that. And then they'll go and talk to the nurse and they'll go, oh, you know what? You're right. We are getting paid more. So once a nurse understands what's fully in his or her travel package, which again is a great topic for us to be able to go over down the road, because there's so many hidden things that can really hurt a nurse on an hourly basis if they're not careful. Once you understand that, then you have a pretty good idea of your pay package. And again, travel nurses are wonderfully smart. They know markets that need to pay better because of cost of living and because of, for lack of a better word, toughness of assignment.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to get a super high, compensation package in a beautiful place here going into, the winter of 2017, 2018. It's supply and demand. If you want to be someplace warm, those of us that come from the north, we all want to. You're not going to get a $40 plus housing kind of compensation on that. If you are, be careful, because there's a reason why that hospital is having to throw that kind of money out there. Yep. So this is the thing for today is understanding this stuff. And it's such a simple model. It's just simple. It's a pie chart and who's getting what, and be okay with getting a lower margin or getting less of that pie if the assignment makes sense. Again, I have no problem with agencies that charge 30%. I think they've got some pretty good reasons for charging 30%. There's an enormous amount of jobs they have. They can keep them gainfully employed. They've earned that right. They've got benefits. They've got a multitude of a team of people to assist them for payroll, for housing, for insurance. There's great benefits to that. There's nothing wrong with having a high margin. It just doesn't happen to be the margin that we follow. And I think a nurse should know what their margin that they're working with on a company is.
So I wanted to switch up gears a little bit. Something I read about online about maxing out the GSA recommended per diems. So tell me a little bit about why agencies don't do that and how that would affect this model if you were to do that.
I think we need another hour and a half for that one.
Oh, okay.
No, it's okay. I mean, the bottom line is this doesn't have anything to do with any kind of a tax advantage. We're showing $34. Another whole discussion would be, of that 34, what is an appropriate amount of taxable versus non-taxable amount? In our case, this is what we show in our company. We don't mess around with these convoluted offers. We say, boom, here's your pay rate. Your overtime is based on time and a half of that 34. And now we can start looking at what that county actually offers for a meals and incidentals rate, which would just be this. There's a separate housing amount. Most agencies, I guess to answer your question long and short, it's the opposite. They want to give more tax-free because guess what? And I'll lean in for this one. They pay less taxes as well.
Of course.
Not only do you charge on the tax dollars too, so be really careful. If you see an agency that they're offering you more tax-free than taxes, if we're not talking about housing, because housing is its own separate thing, but if this amount is even close to 50-50, I don't know a city in the United States, including, the Bay Area and, the 5 boroughs of New York, that this amount would have more tax-free than taxable. The cost of living just isn't that high. We're not in, that kind of a country. Right. So, again, topic for another conversation, but you should follow. Any nurse can look up the GSA.gov and see what the daily meals and incidentals rate is that are allowed to take legally tax-free, and multiply that by what our assumption is of 7 days a week, and that's the amount that you should be getting tax-free. Period. Anything more than that is by design, in my opinion, to have the nurse, net more money, and it's dangerous.
Yeah. Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're talking about wage recharacterization. Is that correct?
I guess so. I mean, we call it a tax advantage. Most in our nursing, that's what
No, I mean, like, as far as when an agency intentionally pays a low taxable rate to increase tax-free to avoid paying payroll taxes. Is that?
Tell me the term you used again.
I've heard it is called as wage recharacterization.
Is it called stealing? No, I mean, is there another term for that? I don't know another term for that. I've never. To me that's insane. But at the end of the day, the bad problem is that if a nurse agrees to a certain pay rate, it's like an employee coming to me internally and saying, "Hey, Mark, I want to 1099 my entire paycheck." I'm off the hook. That responsibility to pay taxes is now on that internal employee. So the only thing I'll address is be careful what you agree, how you agree to be paid. There are a lot of people out here right now that, need to bring in a lot of net money because maybe they're in debt. The last decade has been tough on a lot of people. But man, do it the right way. The most patriotic thing we do for our country is we pay taxes. I'm sorry, if you make more money, and travel nurses typically do, you're going to pay more taxes. There is a wonderful, GSA plan that is an incentive that allows anybody, whether you're a travel nurse or not, if you're working away from your home, you have more costs. You go get boxes of Tide, you have to eat out more often than you normally would. All those things are real reasons that the government has allowed you to take certain amount of your money tax-free, but it's not 50%, not 60%. Like I say, it just doesn't exist, so be super careful.
How does this information help travel nurses out there compare pay packages, would you say?
I don't know. I don't know if it really does. I don't know if it will help them, except for to get them to actually start asking some better questions. Find a company that's willing to divulge one of these two things. I think that's an okay answer. If they're not, then be okay with it, but that's where you'd have to decide, I don't know if this is the right company for me. Transparency that's done without being honest isn't transparency. I've seen that before where companies will say this, then you come start looking at the numbers like, wait a minute, those numbers aren't adding up. Learn how this works would be my guess, so that when recruiters on the phone with you, you can take literally a calculator or a pen and pencil, it's totally simple arithmetic, and see if you can figure out for yourself if it's a good deal. Figure out, what are they offering me for housing? What does that really be? If nothing else, learn how to translate things into an hourly rate based upon 468, or I'll just give you a number. If you're an operating room nurse or a PACU nurse and you work 8-hour shifts, 40 hours a week, it's 520 hours over the course of a 13-week assignment. Base your numbers on that so you can truly get a total compensation, know what they're giving you for your insurance benefit, know what they're giving you for your travel reimbursement, and now you have your total hourly compensation. And that allows you to compare it with previous assignments or assignments from other companies.
Fair enough. Just to clarify, the housing number, that 1,900, that would cover like a hypothetical apartment that you guys would rent out to a traveler. Is that right?
Well, what we would say in this case is we're going to pay $1,900, which we might pay $1,800 plus we may have $100 a month in water, electricity. And I actually use an example of a nurse that's with us in New Hampshire. We found a place for her for $1,800. We've got $100 roughly of expenses. So if that nurse would have chosen to take that money herself, we would have given her $12.18 more per hour. We would have given this $1,900. We would have multiplied it by 3 and then divided that by 13 weeks and given it to her in a weekly tax-free amount, which is the right way to do it.
Yep.
So this is either money if you don't see this, it's because someone's giving you your housing, not a benefit to you, but you should know it still really is, because that's your free living. So I would still classify that in blue because it really still is a benefit. It's not free. So this is either housing or this is money you're going to put in your pocket, which you're going to take a majority of that and use it for your housing.
I get a lot of, not only have I gotten a lot of good feedback, there's always going to be haters, right? Always going to be people that are going to question you, Mark, say, hey, this guy is backwardsly trying to recruit us, right? They're going to think that this is just plain old nonsense, like a really clever way to recruit. And so I guess what I want, if you can, explain to me, why not just follow suit like the entire industry? Why not just do 25%, Mark? Why stick with 20%? Why not do 30%? I mean, because you could get away with it. Everybody else is doing it. You know what I mean?
You could. Well, again, this is just my philosophy. First of all, I'm not that clever. So, not a marketing campaign. I wish I was. What I am clever about is that I want to take the easiest way out, right? I want the easiest route to a successful company. And when I took over the helm here, that was an option. And the option was, what if we lowered our rate and made sure people are aware of it? And while this is helping our company, certainly the people are understanding it, we're not getting people flocking to us. We've had people flock to us for the last 3 or 4 years because they're starting to talk amongst themselves. This certainly is and let's call it like it is. Let's be transparent. This isn't going to hurt our company, but since you and I have been talking, we aren't getting our phones ringing off the hook. And that's okay, because I think nurses really have to kind of really think about this stuff. I would much rather, to answer your question, I would rather have people coming to us because we're paying more. And to me, I use the example all the time in training of the razor companies now. I use a company called Harry's. It's no different than the Dollar Shave Club. I use that company because it's a better product, and I won't name names of the companies that I'm not using, and it's cheaper. So I spend more money. There's a whole bunch of men that shave that are using that product because it's less expensive. So are they gouging into the big razor companies? A little bit, but our goal is not to become one of those huge companies. And by the way, if we do, we're going to stick with that 20% margin because there's going to be plenty of money to go around. This is our operating expense. So of this, you notice there's no commission built in here. There's no cost of our dollars for, for the hospitals to hang on to them for an average of 45 to 60 days. None of that's built in. This is all cost of goods sold. This is what we use multiplied by 100 nurses to have our operating expense. This company, it takes over $2 million a year just to keep our doors open without any profit, obviously. So this is where that goes. So there's no built-in money for fanny packs or for sending out gifts for Nurses Week, or for credentialing, which we'll talk about. We want to put it right here. So to answer your question is, again, maybe I'm not the smartest guy in the book, but it seems to me that if you had a company that was paying more, even though you're making less per nurse, won't eventually that company get bigger by word of mouth? And that's what's been happening in our company for the last 4 or 5 years. We don't do a lot of advertising. We don't spend this dollar on advertising because we aren't going to. And that's a good solution. 25%, 5% maybe is going to throwing your name out there all the time. We're using it to go here, and we're counting on the nurses to tell people about us.
I couldn't have said it better myself. That's awesome.
It's working, and we're doing something right. And so we're going to keep with our model. And I'm hoping that no other companies follow that. I mean, honestly, but those that do, there's plenty to go around. And I think overall, if there's more companies that are doing like we are, the overall travel experience is going to be better.
Awesome.
As you said the other day, it's not real popular out there. There's people that hate companies. They have this bad, their guards are up. They don't think that we're good. We're a necessary evil. There's just a bunch of bashing going on out there, and it didn't used to be like that when I got in this industry. It was, we were all a team. There was a three-way triangle. Another conversation for us down the road, but we were part of it. Now, hospitals are bad, agencies are bad, and it's unfortunate. This could change things. If there's more companies that want to get in this industry and can start their plan out at 20% margin, I think everybody wins.
I couldn't agree more. And so I think that wraps it up. Overall, this information isn't, it's not like learning a new language here. I mean, it's a little abstract because we don't really use these percentages on a regular basis, but this isn't too complicated for the average nurse to understand, which I think is, I read online that by knowing this information, that it would just make things more complicated for the nurse. I don't know. I disagree. I think that the more we know, the better decisions that we can make. And I think you would agree.
There's a lot of nurses that this is just, they don't want to know this, and that's totally their decision. I'm hoping that there's some nurses that are going to start to demand to understand a little bit more. And again, like I said last time you and I talked, if you're going to be a travel nurse, you should make a decision that you should want to understand the finances of being a travel nurse. And I hope this helps.
Oh, heck yeah. Heck yeah. I think this is awesome. I've already written down 17,000 ideas as we've been talking. I don't know, maybe mentally you just, when you start talking to people, it's like, oh yeah, this, and this. So, I appreciate your time as usual, Mark. And I think we're going to end up doing like at least, 72 videos.
It seems like every time we talk, we get to have a whole bunch more added, and I've got a lot because there's just so much good stuff out there, and it should be public knowledge. And I wish it was, and maybe you and I can make it that way.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Mark, again, and I appreciate your time, and I'll be talking with you later.
My pleasure. We'll talk to you soon.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye.